Please note, this is essential content. It's super important to understand the rhetorical methods used by corporate media to control the public. So if you could please hit the like and subscribe buttons, it would raise the channel in the search algorithms. Now, before getting into the partisan channels spitting hatred and ignorance all over the place, it might be helpful to compare them with so-called objective journalism. That's been the go-to model in network news since medieval times. It's been transferred onto internet sites. They've brought with them the set of rhetorical scams, and they're owned by the same financial conglomerates. These details throw a monkey wrench into the objectivity claim. Corporate interests don't produce news out of the goodness of their hearts. Their track record tells the story, from the selling of the Iraq War to the bizarre claims of Russiagate, the daily supply of brainless trash dumped into the public square, and the nightly humpfest of the Clinton impeachment. In that one, and for those who were taught that the presidency is an office of dignity and respect, it was shocking to see how far the media would go to stop a liberal agenda. And there's no reason to think that they'll clean up their act on the new platform. The objectivity model also implies nonpartisanship, which is another hoax. It would be true if the objectivity were real. It isn't, as we've just seen. The better model, at any rate, is bipartisanship. That would actually be useful to the public by covering events in depth and policy from a realistic perspective. Of course, it's not going to happen. Corporate news has never been an honest or comprehensive view of events. Everything is warped and twisted in the service of elite interests, and the same rule will apply to their channels on the net. For example, in covering the border crisis, The Hill uses cherry-picked facts and political theater to conceal the issues. So Mike Johnson leads a mission to the border, the number of migrants is given, and Greg Abbott is sending migrants to Democratic states. Like Johnson's expedition, this is political theater. It's also economic warfare, using a crisis that Republicans helped to create. His motives are assumed to be pure by the trusty reporter, and Lindsey Graham cites a law that the president could use to fix the problem. From the left, John Fetterman explains that border security is not xenophobic. No one asks where he got the term. Eric Adams says that the migrants are creating chaos for New York. He doesn't mention his liberal voters, duped by social justice delusions and happy to stab low-wage workers and American minorities in the back. And the bill submitted by the president was voted down on orders from Mayor McTreason. In all of this, a few details are missing. They include government history on the issue, 50 years of media support for open borders, and the financial interests behind the status quo. And of course, both sides are stalling for reasons that we'll get to later. Next up, Sam Bankman-Fried, a fraudster who contributes to both parties, has slipped the noose on campaign finance violations. Meanwhile, the voice of reason, Tucker Carlson, reports that Nancy Pelosi has an uncanny ability to win in the stock market. These are vague, disjointed references to the system of bribery and corruption that dominates Congress. The structure of the system is not explained, and contact info for election reform groups is not provided. In the Daily Debrief, Claudine Gay has resigned from Harvard. The focus is on her alleged plagiarism and congressional testimony. Rampant wokeism on campus isn't mentioned. Instead, there's a note about a possible investigation into Chinese influence. It's a sample of the levels of corporate deceit, a distraction in which even critical points are missing. Those would be about the many global interests that have infiltrated our institutions, and the investigation is a scam for several reasons. The universities have hidden their donor lists, news corporations are on those lists, and they have been major players in producing woke propaganda. The supposed investigation won't be mentioned again. It's used here as a chew toy for the audience and to divert attention from the real issues. Bloomberg television is even more blatant, using warped claims to sugarcoat the university. The reporter explains, college government has worked for centuries. It doesn't mean you rip up the script. Acknowledge that things were not handled properly, mistakes were made, there have been consequences, and then find a way to move forward. End of lame excuses. But note the sleaze. Excusing Hamas butchery and the terrorizing of Jewish students is rebranded as things not being handled properly. They were just mistakes, not the intentional plots of elite interests. Since college admins have worked for centuries, today's corruption is no problem. The pretext killed two birds with several stones. They're damage control for a curriculum that's both anti-American and anti-Semitic, and they conceal the financial players behind university corruption. Forbes breaking news distracts attention from events with non sequiturs and warps the facts with creative language. Bill Ackman continued his, quote, crusade against Harvard, end quote. Notice the spin. Educational reform is repurposed as a crusade against Harvard. He wants the board to be fired and replaced by a scholarly, politically diverse board. He also objects to the DEI curriculum, the university's response to the Israel-Hamas conflict, and the failure to create a safe environment for students. All are good points, so Ackman needs to be discredited and pronto. It's called shooting the messenger, or in university speak, the ad hominem attack. We're told that Ackman has, quote, resented Harvard for years, end quote. So his disagreement over teaching priorities is rebranded as resentment. Finally, we learn that Ackman is the 783rd richest person in the world. Why, you may ask, is this item placed here? In rhetoric, the last line is the stress position. It summarizes the report. This one does two jobs. It changes the subject, and it scrambles the logical flow with a non sequitur. Even after years of watching the beast in action, I'm still impressed by the casual, machine-like efficiency of corporate guile. All of this is oil money talking. The objective is to misrepresent events and to conceal the foreign and financial interests behind them. So let's have a peek at the real issues, their causes, and the inner workings of our institutions. Regarding the border crisis, open borders has been fixed policy in both parties since the 1980s. That was when globalism and neoliberalism took over. Now that it's been discredited, both parties and the media are scrambling to save it. Hence the commentary about chaos and xenophobia, no mention of the causes of the crisis, and 10 years of stalling. Put simply, open borders is a creation of global and corporate interests that profit from cheap migrant labor. It's also class war against low-wage workers and American minorities. It was easily sold to liberals who could care less about minorities and not at all about the people who do the hard work of society. Both parties have blocked reform for decades, while Republican voters actually think their party is legit. The fix is obvious. Immigration law should be set to protect jobs and raise wages. For that to happen, the bad actors need to be confronted. They include the business interests behind the current system, media that promote it, liberals duped by university fictions, and Republicans distracted by the culture war. As for congressional bribes, the real issues are the government policies that are bought by stock tips and Bankman-Fried's dollars, and the laws that allow widespread government corruption. One option is to research the financial interests behind government policy. Another is to support election reform groups. Claudine Gay's resignation and the cries of racism across liberal media are also distractions from the real issue. That's the wokeism that dominates not only the university, but also the media and corporate management. Yet this is only part of a much larger system of cultural sabotage imposed on society by global interests. It includes free market, supply side, and globalist economics, right-wing culture war, the woke abomination, and 50 years of trash content streamed by corporate media. This is a grave threat to society, but it's beyond the scope of this video. Wokeism is the problem at hand, and it won't be solved by a single boycott or a squabble between corporate liberals crying racism and a Trump-supporting congresswoman whose real agenda is overturning our democracy. It's a massive 50-year problem that needs a massive public response. The objectivity model works by replacing important facts with shallow bullshit. Several of its methods are listed here. There are plenty more where those came from, and it's absolutely critical for the public to understand the whole despicable set. They're explained in detail with description and examples in the book. The partisan model also suppresses key info, but using a different formula. It's the two-dimensional frame in which our side are perfect and the other side are demons from hell bent on global destruction. This works in several ways. It narrows the focus, oversimplifies the issues, clouds reasoning with anger and hatred, and distracts from elite graft with racism, sexism, Marxism, and other moral panics. Worst of all, it prevents us from seeing ourselves clearly, correcting our faults, and compromising with the other side. If liberals could end wokeism and open borders, and Republicans would get rid of supply side and Trump sedition, we might cooperate on a bipartisan and practical agenda. But that won't happen while grifters keep everyone jacked on tribalism. Liberal grifters are the worst because they should know better. But the divide and conquer scam needs to be understood in detail, so the rest of the series will focus on the sleazoid tactics and blind fucking stupidity of the partisan channels.